This hard-working black waitress always gave her all to her job, no matter how hard things got. But the moment she handed a free cup of hot coffee to an elderly worn-out man, her tyrannical manager fired her on the spot. Losing her only source of income, her world began to crumble until a limousine suddenly pulled up in front of her apartment. What she never imagined was that the man she'd helped wasn't just some down-and-out stranger, but someone with the power to change her life in ways she had never dared to dream. Before we dive in, where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me, and don't forget to hype and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The smell hit Claire Donovan the second she pushed through the glass door, burnt coffee beans mixed with that fake vanilla syrup they pumped into everything. It was 5:47 a.m., and Morning Brew Station was already humming with the kind of energy that made her stomach clench. This was the smell of survival. She'd been up since 4:30, wrestling her 6-year-old son Evan into his clothes while he whined about wanting pancakes they didn't have time to make. A quick kiss on his sleepy forehead, a hushed thank you to Mrs. Chen next door, who watched him before school, then the brutal bike ride through Manhattan's pre-dawn chill that left her fingers numb even through her gloves. "You're 3 minutes late." Harold Benton's voice cut through the espresso machine's hiss before Claire even had her coat off. He stood behind the counter with his arms crossed, his thin face pinched into that expression he wore like a uniform, permanent disappointment mixed with barely concealed contempt. "Sorry, Mr. Benton. Evan had a rough morning." Claire shoved her bag into her locker, fingers fumbling with the combination lock. "Your personal life isn't my concern, Donovan. What concerns me is that you're costing this store money every time you show up late. 3 minutes equals approximately $1.47 in lost productivity. That comes out of everyone's quarterly bonus pool." Claire bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper. She wanted to scream that $1.47 wouldn't even buy Evan a carton of milk, that she'd biked 5 miles in 40-degree weather, that maybe, just maybe, a little human decency didn't need to be calculated against a profit margin. Instead she said, "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." Harold turned away, already scanning the morning prep checklist with the intensity of a general inspecting troops. Morning Brew Station wasn't just a coffee shop, it was a franchise machine, one of hundreds scattered across the country, each one running on the same ruthless efficiency model. Every bean was counted, every pump of syrup was measured, every second of an employee's time was monetized, and Harold Benton worshipped at that altar. Claire tied on her apron and stepped behind the counter. Her co-worker, a college kid named Marcus, shot her a sympathetic look while steaming milk for a latte. "Don't let him get to you," he muttered. "Dude's got a stick so far up his." "Marcus," Harold's voice cracked like a whip, "less talking, more working. We have a line forming." Claire looked up. Sure enough, 6 people had materialized at the counter, all of them clutching phones and radiating that special brand of New York impatience, the kind that said their time was worth more than yours could ever be. The next 4 hours passed in a blur. Call out names, steam milk, grind beans, smile, 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 even when someone yelled at her because their double-shot no-foam extra hot vanilla latte wasn't hot enough. Wipe down counters that never stayed clean. Restock cups. Count change. Apologize for things that weren't her fault. This was her life now. Had been for 2 years, ever since Evan's father had decided that fatherhood was too much responsibility and disappeared with a woman he'd met at a gym. No child support, no forwarding address, just Claire and Evan, and an endless parade of bills that arrived faster than her paychecks could cover them. The morning rush finally died around 10:30. Claire's feet ached, her lower back was screaming, and she had a headache brewing behind her eyes. She was wiping down the espresso machine when she noticed him through the window. The old man, he'd been coming around for the past few weeks, always late morning, always shuffling to the same worn armchair in the far corner by the window. He was thin, maybe 70 or older, with a neatly trimmed white beard and the saddest eyes Claire had ever seen. He wore the same charcoal gray wool coat every single day, and Claire could see it was a good coat once, the kind that spoke of better times. Now the elbows were shiny with wear and the hem was starting to unravel. He never bought anything. Just asked for tap water in a small cup and sat there for an hour or two, staring out at the street like he was waiting for something that would never come. "Great," Harold muttered from behind her. "The vagrant's back." Claire felt her jaw tighten. "He's not bothering anyone. He's taking up space without paying for it." That's the definition of bothering, Donovan. Every seat in this establishment represents potential revenue. When freeloaders occupy them, we lose money. There are like 3 other people here, and half the seats are empty. That's not the point. Harold's voice rose sharp enough that the few customers glanced over. He caught himself, smoothing down his tie. The point is principle. We are not a homeless shelter. We are not a public library. We sell coffee. If he can't afford to buy anything, he needs to leave. But he didn't make the old man leave. Claire had noticed that over the past few weeks, Harold would complain and glare, but he never actually confronted him. He'd once gotten roasted online after someone filmed him kicking out a teen for loitering, and the store's rating had tanked for months. Harold wasn't risking another viral clip. He preferred muttering and posturing to actual confrontation. Claire went back to work, but her eyes kept drifting to the corner. The old man sat perfectly still, his hands wrapped around that small cup of water like it was something precious. Every now and then, his gaze would land on a young family at a nearby table, a mom, dad and little girl sharing a muffin, and something would flicker across his face. A pain so deep it made Claire's chest hurt just witnessing it. She knew that look. It was the look of someone who'd lost something they could never get back. When she wiped down the table next to his during a lull, she bent down slightly. "Are you doing okay today, sir?" His pale blue eyes lifted to hers, and for a second she saw surprise there, like he'd forgotten people could still see him. He nodded slowly. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Yes, thank you for asking." It wasn't much, just a few words. But something about the gratitude in his tone, like such a small kindness was the most unexpected gift, made Claire's throat tighten. She left the newspaper someone had abandoned on his table before heading back behind the counter. "Donovan." Harold's hiss made her jump. "What did I just tell you about fraternizing? I was clearing tables. You were wasting time on someone who contributes nothing to our bottom line. Stop it. Now, do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Mr. Benton." But she didn't stop, not really. The small gestures continued. A quiet good morning when the old man arrived, making sure his water cup was always full, leaving that day's abandoned newspaper within reach. It was rebellion in its smallest form, a tiny act of defiance against the cold machinery of corporate efficiency. It was the only part of her job that didn't feel like it was slowly draining the life out of her, and Claire Donovan, broke and exhausted and scared about the future, needed that tiny spark of humanity more than she could ever admit. She just didn't know yet how much that spark would cost her. The rain came on a Wednesday with a violence that caught everyone off guard. Claire had checked the weather that morning, 40% chance of light showers, nothing serious. But by the time she'd dropped Evan at school and biked halfway to work, the sky had opened up like something biblical. Ice-cold rain slammed down in sheets, soaking through her supposedly waterproof jacket in seconds, turning the streets into rivers of dirty gray water. By the time she stumbled through Morning Brew Station's door, she was drenched and shivering so hard her teeth chattered. "You look like a drowned rat, Donovan." Harold barely looked up from his tablet. "There's a mop in the back. Clean up whatever water you're dripping on my floor." "Good morning to you too," Claire muttered, too cold to care about the edge in her voice. The cafe's heating system was struggling, cranking out air that was barely warmer than outside. She changed into her spare uniform shirt in the bathroom, but her jeans were soaked through, and every step felt like walking in ice water. It was going to be a brutal day. She could feel it, and she was right. The weather turned everyone mean. Customers came in already angry, taking out their misery on whoever was closest. Claire got screamed at by a man in a suit because his mobile order wasn't ready the instant he walked in. A woman threatened to report her to corporate because her latte was lukewarm despite the steam literally rising from the cup. Harold was in rare form, prowling behind the counter like a predator hunting for mistakes. He pointed out a crooked stack of napkins here, a fingerprint on the espresso machine, the fact that Marcus had put exactly 3 extra coffee beans in a bag when measuring out a pour-over. "This is theft, Marcus. You understand that. Those beans have a cost. When you give customers more than they pay for, you're stealing from the company." It was like 5 beans. "I don't care if it's 5 beans or $5. A thief is a thief." Claire watched Marcus's face flush red with humiliation. She wanted to say something, to defend him, but the words stuck in her throat. She needed this job. Evan needed her to have this job, so she kept her mouth shut and kept working. Around 2 in the afternoon, during a brief lull in customers, she was restocking the pastry case when she saw him through the rain-streaked window. Samuel Harper was shuffling toward the cafe, and he looked terrible. His gray coat was absolutely soaked, plastered to his thin frame like a second skin. Even from here, she could see him shaking, not just a light shiver but a full-body tremor that seemed to rattle his bones. His face was ashen, his lips tinged with blue. He looked like someone on the edge of hypothermia. "Oh no," Claire whispered. She watched him push through the door, water streaming off him onto the floor. Harold had made such a big deal about keeping clean. The old man didn't seem to notice or care. He just made his way to his usual corner and collapsed into the chair, his breathing ragged and shallow. Claire abandoned the pastry case and started toward him, but Harold's voice stopped her cold. "Where do you think you're going? He's soaking wet. I just want to." "You want to what?" "Offer him a warm towel, call him an ambulance. This isn't a charity, Donovan. If he's uncomfortable he can leave." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "He's an elderly man and he's freezing. What if something happens to him? Then he should have made better life choices." Harold's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing inventory numbers instead of a human being. "Not our problem, not our responsibility. Get back to work." For a long moment, Claire just stood there. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to go help that man, but the logical part of her brain, the part that paid rent and bought groceries and kept Evan clothed, knew that defying Harold directly would end badly. She went back behind the counter, but her eyes kept drifting to the corner. Samuel sat hunched in the chair, his arms wrapped around himself, still shaking. He'd managed to pour himself a cup of water from the self-serve station, but his hands trembled so badly that water slopped over the rim. Come on, Claire thought desperately. Someone else help him. Anyone. But the handful of other customers studiously ignored him. One woman even moved to a different table, farther away, like his misery might be contagious. Time crawled. 15 minutes passed. 20. The old man wasn't getting better. If anything, he looked worse. His eyes had taken on a glassy, unfocused quality that terrified her. Harold had disappeared into his back office, probably analyzing sales data with the fervor of a medieval monk studying scripture. Marcus was in the storage room, restocking syrups. The cafe was quiet, almost empty, and right in front of her, a fresh pot of coffee had just finished brewing. Claire stared at it. Morning Brew Station had a policy: any coffee older than 20 minutes had to be poured down the drain to maintain optimal freshness standards. This pot had maybe 5 minutes left on its timer before Harold would make her dump it. Perfectly good coffee, about to become waste. Her hands moved before her brain could argue with them. She grabbed a real ceramic mug, not one of the paper-to-go cups, but one of the nice ones they usually reserved for dine-in customers who actually paid. She filled it with the steaming black coffee, added 2 sugar packets and a spoon to a small saucer. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This could cost her everything, but she couldn't watch him suffer. She just couldn't. Claire walked out from behind the counter, her footsteps quiet on the tile floor. When she reached the corner, Samuel didn't even notice her at first. His eyes were closed, his head tilted back against the chair. "Sir?" His eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused, lost in some internal fog of cold and exhaustion. Claire held out the mug. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, like she was sharing a dangerous secret. "I thought you could use this. It's on the house. Please drink it before it gets cold." For a long moment, he just stared at her, then at the cup. Something shifted in his eyes, confusion giving way to a profound, almost painful gratitude. His trembling hands reached out and closed around the warm ceramic like it was a lifeline. He brought the cup to his lips with shaking movements and took a slow, deep sip. She watched color begin to return to his cheeks, watched his shoulders drop slightly as the warmth spread through him. When he looked at her again, his eyes were clearer. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, a single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. He nodded, just once, but that nod said everything. Claire felt warmth bloom in her chest, a genuine human connection in this sterile corporate space. For just a moment, the world felt less cold. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Donovan?" The voice was ice, sharp, deadly. Claire's blood froze. Harold Benton stood at the end of the counter, his arms crossed, his face a mask of absolute fury. He'd seen everything. Mr. Benton, I can explain. Explain. His voice was low but venomous, carefully controlled so the few remaining customers wouldn't fully hear. Explain how you stole company property. Explain how you gave away inventory without running a transaction. It was from the pot we were about to throw out. It wasn't going to be sold. It is not waste until I say it's waste. Harold's whisper was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. That coffee is company property. Every cup, every drop. And you just gave it away to that freeloader. He gestured dismissively toward Samuel, who sat frozen in his chair, the mug clutched in his hands, his eyes wide with alarm. He was freezing, Claire said, and she could hear her own voice starting to shake with anger now. It was a simple cup of coffee. It was the decent thing to do. Decency doesn't pay the bills, Donovan. Policy does. Procedure does. Harold stepped closer, his face inches from hers. I have given you warnings, multiple warnings, about engaging with him, and you directly, willfully and flagrantly violated company policy, on inventory management, on customer engagement, on basic professional conduct. It's a $2 cup of coffee that was going down the drain. That's not the point. His voice rose loud enough that everyone in the cafe turned to stare. Harold caught himself, smoothed his tie, and suddenly his expression changed, became formal. Performative. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Claire Donovan, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, as manager of this establishment, I am terminating your employment effective immediately, for theft of company property and gross insubordination. The words hit her like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt. Pack your personal belongings. You have 2 minutes to vacate the premises. You can't be serious, Claire whispered. She could feel all those eyes on her. Customers, Marcus frozen in shock by the storage room door. The humiliation was a living thing, crawling up her spine. Mr. Benton, please, I need this job. I have a son. Should have thought of that before you decided to play Mother Teresa on company time. A cruel smile played at the corners of Harold's mouth. He was enjoying this. Your final paycheck will be mailed. Now get out. He turned his back on her, dismissed, like she was nothing. Claire stood there, her mind spinning frantically. The rent, Evan's winter coat, the electricity bill, food, oh God, food. Her legs carried her toward the back room on autopilot. She grabbed her worn purse, her jacket. Everything felt like it was happening to someone else, like she was watching herself in a movie. When she walked back out, she couldn't look at anyone. But as she reached the door, her eyes found the old man in the corner. Samuel Harper was on his feet, his face etched with distress. He took a step toward her, his mouth opening like he wanted to protest, to say something, to stop this. Claire gave a tiny shake of her head. Not your fault. Then she pushed through the door, and stepped out into the freezing rain. The bell tinkled softly behind her, an ending she never saw coming. The rain was merciless. Within seconds, Claire was soaked through again, her thin jacket providing zero protection against the icy downpour. Water streamed down her face, rain mixed with tears she couldn't hold back anymore, though she wasn't sure when she'd started crying. Her bike was locked up outside, but she couldn't ride it. Not like this, not with her hands shaking, and her vision blurred, and her chest so tight she could barely breathe. She started walking. 3 miles, that's how far her apartment was from Morning Brew Station. In good weather, it was a 40-minute walk. In this storm it would take over an hour. Claire put one foot in front of the other, and tried not to think, but her brain wouldn't shut off. It kept replaying the scene on an endless loop. Harold's face, the cruel satisfaction in his voice, the way everyone had stared at her, like she was a criminal. The word kept echoing, thief, thief, thief. She'd given away a cup of coffee that was going to be dumped down a drain in 5 minutes anyway, and he'd called her a thief. The absurdity was almost funny. Almost, except it wasn't funny at all, because she was jobless now, fired. And in this economy, in this city, that was catastrophic. The panic started creeping in, cold fingers wrapping around her lungs. Rent was due in 8 days, $1,200. She had maybe $500 in her checking account. Harold had said her final paycheck would be mailed, but that would be short, probably less than $400, since she'd only worked half the pay period. Even if it arrived on time, which it wouldn't, because nothing good ever happened on time, she'd still be $300 short. Mrs. Chen charged $150 a week to watch Evan before and after school. That was due tomorrow. The electricity bill, the phone bill, food. Evan needed new shoes. His current ones were so worn out, she could see his socks through the toes, and his winter coat. She'd been planning to buy him one this weekend, had been saving for weeks to afford even the cheapest one at Target. Now there was nothing. The city streets blurred around her, every warm coffee shop window, every person hurrying past with an umbrella, every car that splashed her with gutter water, all of it felt like a personal mockery. The world was moving on, people living their lives, while hers had just been detonated. Was it really about the coffee, or was it that she'd dared to operate on a different set of rules than Harold's, that she'd shown a loyalty to a fellow human being that he believed should be reserved for the corporation? In Harold's world, compassion was a fireable offense. By the time Claire finally reached her apartment building, a tired 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was up and coming, according to the rental listing, but really just meant still cheap, she was shivering so violently her teeth were chattering. Her clothes dripped a puddle onto the worn linoleum lobby floor. She trudged up the 2 flights of stairs on legs that felt like lead. When she opened the door, Mrs. Chen was on the couch helping Evan with a coloring book. Her neighbor looked up with a smile that died the instant she saw Claire's face. "Claire dear, you're home so early. And oh my goodness, you're drenched. What happened?" Evan jumped up and wrapped his arms around her wet legs. "Mommy, you're all soggy." Claire forced a smile that felt like it would crack her face. She hugged her son tight, burying her face in his hair, drawing strength from him even as her heart was breaking. "I'm okay, sweetie. Mommy just got caught in the rain." She couldn't tell them. Not yet. She couldn't say the words out loud because that would make it real. After Mrs. Chen left, with Claire promising to take a hot shower and rest, Claire peeled off her wet clothes and stood under scalding water until her skin turned red. She thought maybe it would wash away the humiliation, the fear, the crushing weight of what had just happened. It didn't. That evening, after Evan fell asleep clutching his stuffed dinosaur, Claire sat at their tiny kitchen table with all the bills spread out in front of her like a tarot reading of a doomed future. She opened her laptop. Job search websites. Barista, waitress, cashier, retail associate. The listings blurred together, most of them requiring online applications that would disappear into algorithmic black holes. And what would she say when they asked why she left her last job? Fired for theft. The words would follow her, poison her chances. Harold had made sure of that. Hours passed. The rain finally stopped, leaving behind an unnerving silence. The city was asleep. Claire had never felt more alone in her entire life. She thought about the old man, Samuel. She hoped he'd finished the coffee, hoped he'd warmed up, hoped he'd made it home safely. Then a darker thought crept in, bitter and resentful and shameful, but there nonetheless. Why him? Why did my life have to implode over him? It wasn't his fault, she knew that. But in the dark, lonely hours of the night, anger was easier to feel than fear. Claire closed the laptop. She checked on Evan, pulling his blanket up to his chin, kissing his forehead. His peaceful sleeping face was the only thing keeping her from completely falling apart. "I'll figure it out, sweetie," she whispered into the darkness. "I promise." But the promise felt hollow. A lie she was telling the one person who trusted her completely. She crawled into bed but sleep wouldn't come. She just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the drip of water from the eaves outside. Each drop counting down the seconds to a future she couldn't bear to face. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. And tomorrow everything would change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Morning arrived, gray and oppressive, the sky still heavy with leftover clouds from yesterday's storm. Claire had maybe slept 2 hours, her mind too wired with anxiety to fully shut down. When the alarm went off at 6 a.m., she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. She went through the motions, getting Evan dressed, making him toast with the last of the peanut butter, walking him to school while forcing cheerfulness into her voice that sounded foreign even to her ears. At the school gate, Evan hugged her extra tight. "You okay, mommy? You seem sad." Kids always knew. They could read emotions like adults read street signs. "I'm okay, baby, just tired. You have a good day, all right?" He nodded and ran off toward his classroom, his too small coat flapping behind him. Back at the apartment, silence pressed down on her like a physical weight. She made coffee with the last of the grounds and sat down at the laptop. Applications. She needed to blast out as many as possible. But after an hour of filling out forms, why are you interested in this position? What are your strengths? Why did you leave your previous employer? The words started swimming on the screen. Every question felt like an accusation. It was a little after 11 a.m. when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in her neighborhood. A deep, powerful rumble of an engine. Not the usual sputtering cars and delivery trucks that populated these streets. This was something else entirely. Claire walked to the window and her breath caught. Parked directly in front of her building, double parked and commanding the entire street, was a limousine. Not just any limousine. A massive black one with windows so darkly tinted they looked like polished obsidian. It gleamed even under the gray sky, completely out of place in this working-class neighborhood. It might as well have been a UFO. Neighbors were already peeking out windows. A few people on the sidewalk had stopped to stare. Claire's first thought was that they had the wrong address. Her second thought, a jolt of pure panic, was debt collectors. Had she fallen so far behind on something that they sent a limousine to repossess her life? She watched frozen as the rear door opened. A man stepped out. He was maybe late 40s, tall and impeccably dressed in a dark tailored suit that probably cost more than Claire made in 3 months. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and he held a sleek leather briefcase. Everything about him screamed money and power and a world Claire didn't belong to. He looked up at her building. Directly at her window, Claire stepped back instinctively, her heart hammering. A moment later, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through her apartment. She stood paralyzed in her living room. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to pretend she wasn't home. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. On shaking legs, Claire crept to the door and peered through the peephole. The man in the suit stood in her hallway, patient and calm. He wasn't going away. She unlatched the deadbolt, but left the chain on, opening the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" The man's expression was professional, not unkind. "Are you Miss Claire Donovan?" "Yes, my name is Michael Reed, I'm an attorney." He held up a business card, thick, expensive looking, with embossed lettering. "I represent a client who has asked me to speak with you. May I come in for a moment?" An attorney. Claire's mind went completely blank. This was it. She was being sued. Harold was pressing charges for theft. She was going to lose custody of Evan. She was Miss Donovan. "I assure you you're not in any trouble." Michael's voice was calm, measured, like he dealt with panicking people every day. "Quite the opposite. My client has a business proposition for you. It concerns the events of yesterday at Morning Brew Station." Claire stared at him through the crack. "I don't understand. I know this is unexpected. It would be much easier to explain if you would be willing to accompany me. My client would like to meet with you in person. He's waiting for us now." "Waiting where?" A slight pause. "At Morning Brew Station." The words didn't make sense. "Go back there, to the scene of her humiliation, face Harold again." "Absolutely not. Why would I ever?" "Because Miss Donovan," Michael said, his gaze steady and serious, "my client believes a grave injustice has been done to you, and he is in a unique position to rectify it. I can promise you it will be very much worth your while." He slid his card through the crack. It landed softly on her floor. "My client is a very private man, but he's also very determined. We'll wait in the car for 10 minutes. If you decide to come, we can resolve this today. If not, I'll respect your decision." He paused. "But you may be walking away from a significant opportunity." With that he turned and walked back down the hallway. Claire stood there, her mind a whirlwind. She picked up the business card. Michael Reed, ESQ, Senior Partner, Reed & Associates Corporate Law. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of scam. Or a cruel joke. But then she looked around her apartment. At the bills on the table. At Evan's coat hanging by the door with the broken zipper she couldn't afford to fix. What was the worst that could happen? More humiliation. She'd already hit rock bottom. And what if by some impossible chance, this was legitimate? Claire ran to her bedroom and threw on the nicest clothes she owned. Black slacks and a clean blue blouse. She ran a brush through her hair, stared at her terrified reflection. This was either the smartest or the most foolish decision of her life. She grabbed her keys and ran. The interior of the limousine was like stepping into another dimension. Rich leather seats, polished wood trim, the scent of expensive cologne and new car. It was so silent that the noise of the city completely vanished the moment the door closed. Michael Reed sat across from her, occasionally checking his phone. He offered no additional information, and Claire was too overwhelmed to ask questions. The ride was short, maybe 10 minutes, but every second felt like an hour. Claire's mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, each one more unlikely than the last. When they turned the final corner and Morning Brew Station came into view, Claire's stomach dropped. A black SUV with tinted windows was already parked out front, discreet, unmarked, but undeniably expensive. And standing next to it were two figures. One was a sharp-looking woman in a business suit holding a tablet. The other made Claire's heart stop. It was Samuel Harper, the old man from the cafe. But he wasn't the same person. He still wore the charcoal gray coat, but now it was draped over his shoulders like a cape. Underneath he was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit that fit his frame with understated elegance. His white hair and beard were still neatly trimmed, but he stood taller, straighter. The frail vulnerability was completely gone. In its place was an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. He looked from the cafe to their approaching car, his pale blue eyes clear and intelligent and piercing. Claire felt dizzy. This couldn't be the same man. It wasn't possible. Their limousine glided to a stop. Michael opened her door. "Miss Donovan," he said calmly. "Allow me to formally introduce you to my client, Mr. Arthur Peterson." The name meant nothing to her, but as Claire stepped out onto the sidewalk, as the old man's eyes met hers with that same profound sadness mixed with something new, strength, determination, purpose, she knew with absolute certainty that her life was about to change forever. "Miss Donovan, Samuel." "No," Arthur Peterson said, his voice a low resonant baritone that was nothing like the whispered gratitude from yesterday. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for the theatricality, but I felt a certain statement was necessary." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Jessica Davies, my lead counsel." The woman nodded professionally. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. She could only stare. "I know you're confused," Arthur continued gently, "and you deserve answers. But first," he turned his gaze to the front of Morning Brew Station, and his expression hardened into something that made Claire's skin prickle. "First, I believe Mr. Benton is about to have a very educational morning. Shall we?" He offered his arm like a gentleman from another era. And Claire Donovan, jobless and terrified and completely out of her depth, took it. They walked toward the cafe together. The bell above the door was about to ring one more time, and nothing would ever be the same again. The bell above the door of Morning Brew Station chimed with that same familiar sound, the one that had marked Claire's humiliating exit less than 24 hours ago. This time it announced something very different. Harold Benton stood behind the counter, his back to the door, lecturing Marcus about the proper way to arrange the pastry display. His voice had that same condescending edge, that tone that suggested everyone around him was incompetent. "The croissants go in the front left, Marcus, not the front right. We've been over this 100 times. Customer eye tracking studies show." He turned around, irritated by the interruption, and his entire face went through a rapid transformation. First confusion as he registered Claire standing there, then a flash of rage. How dare she come back? Finally, as his eyes landed on the two lawyers and the imposing figure of Arthur Peterson, something else entirely. Pure, paralyzing shock. What is the meaning of this?" Harold's voice cracked slightly. He tried to recover, drawing himself up to his full height. "Donovan, I told you that you were terminated. You're trespassing. I'm calling security." "That won't be necessary, Mr. Benton." Michael Reed's voice cut through the air with the precision of a judge's gavel. The few customers in the cafe fell silent, sensing the electricity in the room. Even the espresso machine seemed to quiet down. Arthur Peterson walked slowly toward the counter, not shuffling now, walking with the measured confidence of someone who owned the ground beneath his feet. Because Claire realized with dawning shock, he probably did. He stopped directly in front of Harold, and the silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. "Mr. Benton," Arthur began, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "My name is Arthur Peterson, and I own this company, all of it." Harold's jaw worked but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving him the shade of old newspaper. He looked like a man watching his execution. "I don't, Mr. Peterson, sir. I wasn't aware. Of course you weren't aware. Arthur's tone was almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. That was rather the point. You see, for the past few weeks, I've been visiting this establishment. I've sat in that corner, he gestured toward the worn armchair by the window, and I've observed. Harold's eyes darted to the chair, then back to Arthur. You could see him doing the math, his face cycling through disbelief and horror. The old man, he whispered. You were the vagrant I believe you called me, the freeloader, the liability. Arthur's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. I've observed your management style, Mr. Benton. I've watched you berate your staff. I've seen you treat both customers and non-customers with equal contempt. I've witnessed you turn what should be a simple coffee shop into a regime of fear. Sir, I was following company policy. Everything I did was by the book. The manual is very clear about inventory control. And yes, the policy. Arthur's eyes narrowed, a convenient shield for the cruel. Tell me, Mr. Benton, is there a company policy against basic human decency? Is compassion listed as a fireable offense in your precious manual? Harold's face flushed red. She stole company property. She gave away a cup of coffee that was destined for the drain in less than 5 minutes. Arthur interrupted. Yes, I'm aware. I was there. I was the recipient of that terrible theft. The sarcasm in his voice was withering. Jessica Davies stepped forward, tapping on her tablet with perfectly manicured nails. Mr. Benton, she said calmly, Mr. Peterson's visit yesterday didn't start an audit. It simply gave us grounds to reactivate a review that had been paused several months ago. Harold blinked. Review? What review? Our numbers are solid. We're one of the top performing locations in the district. Oh, your revenue numbers look perfectly fine, Jessica replied, her tone crisp and clinical. They always did. That's why our internal systems flagged something else. She lifted the tablet slightly. Inventory patterns. Specifically, repeated entries of high-value items marked as damaged or spoiled under your manager code. Harold swallowed hard. Jessica continued, her voice gaining an edge sharp enough to cut glass. Premium coffee beans, artisanal syrups, branded tumblers, specialty merchandise, all written off as shrinkage. But what's interesting, Mr. Benton, is that many of these same items later appeared for sale on various online marketplaces. She met his eyes, cold, predatory, unblinking. eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. Harold's hand latched onto the counter as if he needed it to stay upright. That's a coincidence, a misunderstanding. Those listings aren't. We didn't think so either. Michael Reed interrupted smoothly as he opened a folder from his briefcase. Which is why, months ago, we began collecting evidence. He laid several pages on the counter, screenshots of listings tied to an account registered to your home address, PayPal deposits that correlate with the missing inventory, and 3 customer statements confirming that packages were shipped from the vicinity of this store. The folder hit the counter with a soft thud, but the dread it carried was thunderous. Our preliminary reanalysis, Jessica said, emphasizing the word, indicates a consistent pattern of misappropriation dating back at least 14 months. Conservative projections place the value at over $40,000. She lowered the tablet. This is not a final conclusion, Mr. Benton, but it is more than enough to justify a formal investigation. The number hung in the air like smoke. Marcus, standing frozen by the pastry case, let out a barely audible "holy shit." One of the customers, a woman in yoga pants who'd been pretending to read on her phone, had given up all pretense and was openly staring, her mouth hanging open. Harold looked from the folder to Arthur to the lawyers, his face cycling through a dozen expressions. Denial, fear, desperation. He looked like a cornered animal. This is you can't prove. I can explain all of this. Don't bother. Arthur's voice was final, absolute. What you can't explain, what you will never be able to explain to my satisfaction, is how a man who was stealing thousands of dollars felt justified in destroying the life of a single mother over a $2 cup of coffee. How someone engaged in systematic theft had the audacity to call someone else a thief. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. The mistake was mine, Mr. Benton, for allowing a culture in my company where someone like you could thrive while someone like Miss Donovan was punished for showing basic human kindness. That mistake is being corrected. Starting right now. Arthur turned to Michael Reed. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a formal investigation. Corporate legal will contact you within 48 hours. Based on what we've already found, I advise you to retain a lawyer. No, the word burst from Harold, like he'd been punched. You can't, I have a contract, I have rights. This is wrongful termination. Actually, Jessica said, not looking up from her tablet, your employment contract has a morality clause. Theft is explicitly listed as grounds for immediate termination without severance. You'll be receiving a letter from our legal team outlining the company's intention to pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery of stolen assets. Harold's face crumpled. He looked at Claire, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never expected to see: desperate, pleading fear. The same fear she'd felt when he'd fired her. He opened his mouth, maybe to curse at her, maybe to beg, but no words came. The door chimed again. 2 men in dark suits with building security badges entered the cafe. They'd been waiting outside, Claire realized. This whole thing had been choreographed. Mr. Benton, one of them said politely but firmly, please come with us. They flanked him like guards escorting a prisoner. Harold cast one last look around the cafe, his kingdom, the place where he'd been untouchable just yesterday, and then he was being led toward the door. As he passed Claire, he stopped. She tensed, half expecting him to lash out at her one final time. But he just looked at her, his eyes filled with hatred and fear, and something else, the dawning realization that he'd brought this entirely on himself. Then he was gone. The bell chimed as the door closed behind him. The cafe was dead silent. Claire stood there, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. It felt surreal, like watching a movie where she was both the audience and the star. Arthur turned away from the door, and faced her. The hard authority in his expression melted away, replaced by that gentle sadness she'd first seen in his eyes. Now Miss Donovan, he said softly, let's discuss your future. The remaining customers in Morning Brew Station had given up any pretense of not eavesdropping. They sat frozen with their coffee cups halfway to their lips, staring at the drama unfolding like they'd accidentally stumbled onto a movie set. Marcus stood behind the counter looking shell-shocked, his eyes darting between Claire and Arthur Peterson, like he was watching a tennis match. Arthur gestured toward a table by the window, not his usual corner, but a different one, the one where families usually sat, where Claire had seen him watch those happy groups with such longing. Would you join me for a moment? Claire's legs felt disconnected from her body as she walked to the table. She sank into the chair he held out for her, very aware that her hands were shaking. Michael Reed and Jessica Davies remained standing at a respectful distance near the door, giving them privacy but staying close enough to handle whatever came next. For a long moment, Arthur just looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. My wife Eleanor, he began, his voice low and reflective. She loved this specific location, not for the coffee, she always said it was mediocre at best. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. She loved this table, said it had the perfect view of the old courthouse clock tower. Claire followed his gaze. Sure enough, through the window between 2 buildings, you could see the historic clock tower, its face showing 11:43. We sat here one afternoon about a year ago. It was raining, much like yesterday. She was already sick then, though we didn't know how little time we had left. His voice caught slightly. She spent an hour just watching people rush by, and she told me something I'll never forget. She said, Arthur, everyone is in such a hurry to get somewhere else. They've forgotten how to be kind right where they are. He turned back to Claire, and his pale blue eyes held a depth of emotion that made her throat tight. She made me promise I would try to remember that, to practice it, after she passed. He paused, collecting himself. After she passed, the world felt colorless. All my money, my power, my influence, none of it could fill the silence she left behind. I'm so sorry, Claire whispered. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Thank you. So I started coming back to her favorite places, wearing this old coat she'd bought me 30 years ago, before Harper Industries became what it is now. I wanted to see the world the way she saw it. I wanted to find that kindness she believed in. He sighed, a sound heavy with loneliness. For 3 months I found mostly what she feared. People too busy to see a person in need, too wrapped up in their own concerns to extend a hand. I was invisible, or worse, I was an inconvenience. Until yesterday, Claire said quietly. Until yesterday. Arthur leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. What you did, Miss Donovan, was more than just giving a stranger a cup of coffee. In my world, gestures are calculated. Kindness is usually a transaction, a prelude to asking for something. It's been a very long time since I encountered something genuine, something given freely with no expectation of reward. He looked so cold. Anyone would have. No, his voice was firm. Not anyone. I sat in that corner for 3 months. Dozens of staff members saw me, hundreds of customers. You were the only one who treated me like a human being. You risked your livelihood, the very thing that keeps a roof over your son's head, for a stranger. Claire felt tears welling up. The stress of the last 24 hours, the fear, the humiliation, the impossible relief of what had just happened, it was all crashing over her at once. You honored my wife's memory without ever knowing her, Arthur continued, and for that act of basic human decency, you were punished. That is an outcome I find entirely unacceptable. He sat back, his expression shifting from reflective to resolute. All business now, which is why I cannot simply give you your old job back. That would be an insult to what you endured. You're better than that position, Miss Donovan. This place, he gestured around the cafe, is fundamentally broken. It's been run on fear and suspicion, and a toxic adherence to policy over people. It needs more than a new manager. Claire's heart was pounding. She wasn't sure where this was going, but the intensity in his voice made her feel like she was standing at the edge of something enormous. It needs a new heart, Arthur said. It needs a leader who understands that profit and decency are not mutually exclusive. Someone who sees employees as human beings, not just labor units. Someone who would give a freezing old man a cup of coffee, even when it might cost them everything. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I'm offering you a position, Claire. I intend to make you the general manager of this location. Complete the accelerated training program, pass the standard checks, and the position is yours. The words didn't make sense. Claire heard them, but they seemed to be in a foreign language her brain couldn't quite translate. What? Me, Mr. Peterson? I don't have any management experience. I barely finished community college. I don't know anything about payroll or ordering, or inventory systems, or a bewildered laugh escaped her. I can barely manage my own checking account. I wouldn't know where to start. You know how to treat people with respect, Arthur countered gently. That's the first and most important qualification. Everything else can be taught. But I didn't just watch you yesterday, Claire. I watched you for 3 months. I saw how you handled the angry businessman who spilled his latte. You cleaned it up with patience and grace instead of making him feel worse. I saw you help that elderly woman read the menu when she'd forgotten her glasses. I saw you organizing the pastry case with meticulous care, even though Harold never acknowledged it. You're good at this work, you're just good at it in a way that Harold never valued. He leaned forward again, his voice earnest. I'm not looking for an MBA, Claire. I have plenty of those, and frankly some of them are the coldest people I've ever met. I'm looking for a moral compass. I've already found it. Jessica Davies approached the table and discreetly placed a leather-bound folder in front of Arthur. He pushed it gently toward Claire. This is the formal offer. General Manager's salary $65,000 annually to start, with performance bonuses, full benefits including health insurance, 4 weeks paid vacation, and a comprehensive training program. You'll spend the next month working with our corporate team learning every system with full pay. Claire's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The official letterhead swam in her vision. $65,000. She currently made $28,000. This was more than double. This was life-changing. I can't. Words failed her completely. There's more, Arthur said softly, and something in his tone made her look up. His eyes had gone gentle again, that sadness mixed with warmth. Michael Reed stepped forward and placed another folder on the table. This one was even more official looking, bound in dark blue leather with gold embossing. Open it, Arthur encouraged. Claire's hands shook so badly she could barely manage the clasp. Inside were legal documents, thick and important looking. At the top of the first page in bold letters, the Evan Donovan Educational Trust, her son's name. In official legal documents. What is this? Read it, Arthur said gently. Claire's eyes scanned the dense legal language, but certain phrases jumped out: fully funded educational trust, all tuition and fees, elementary through university, books, supplies and reasonable living expenses, any accredited institution in the United States. It was a complete education fund, for Evan, from kindergarten through a 4-year university, everything. Tuition, books, housing if he went away to school, everything. The number at the bottom, the initial trust funding, made her dizzy. $500,000. I don't understand, she whispered. This is why would you? Because your integrity has value, Claire. Because you showed my wife's kind of kindness in a world that desperately needs more of it. Because your son deserves every opportunity, and you deserve not to lie awake at night, terrified about how you'll pay for his future. The dam broke. Claire felt hot tears spill down her cheeks, and she couldn't stop them. Didn't want to stop them. These weren't tears of despair like last night. These were tears of overwhelming, impossible relief. All those nights lying awake doing math in her head, trying to figure out how she could possibly afford even community college for Evan someday. All those times watching other kids in his class talk about their tutors and their private schools and their college funds, while she couldn't even afford to fix his broken coat zipper. Gone. In an instant that crushing weight was just gone. I don't know what to say, she managed through the tears. This is too much. I can't possibly. You can, Arthur said firmly. And you will. All I ask is that you accept. Say you'll help me make this place, this one small corner of the world, a little warmer. A place where kindness isn't punished. A place Eleanor would have been proud of. Claire looked down at the documents again. Her son's name in that gold-embossed lettering, a future stretching out before him, bright and possible and no longer constrained by her poverty. She looked up at Arthur Peterson, this man who'd sat in the corner in a worn coat and watched the world, testing whether his late wife's faith in humanity was justified. And she'd given him his answer. One small cup of coffee. Yes, Claire whispered. Then stronger yes, of course, thank you. Thank you so much. Arthur's face broke into a genuine smile, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his features, made him look younger, lighter. No, Claire, thank you. You gave me something infinitely more valuable than money. You reminded me that people like my Eleanor were right. That kindness still exists, that it's worth protecting. He stood and Claire hastily got to her feet as well. He extended his hand and she shook it, feeling the firm grip of someone sealing a promise. My team will be in touch this afternoon to handle all the paperwork and arrange your training schedule. Take today to process everything. Celebrate with your son. Buy him that winter coat. His eyes twinkled slightly. And tomorrow we begin transforming this place. Together. With a final nod, Arthur Peterson turned and walked toward the door. Jessica and Michael fell in step behind him like a well-practiced formation. At the door, Arthur paused and looked back at the cafe. Really looked at it, the way an owner might look at something they were entrusting to someone else. Then his eyes found Claire's one last time. Run it your way, he said simply. That's all Eleanor would have wanted, for someone to care. The bell chimed as they left, and Claire stood alone in the center of Morning Brew Station, her cafe now. She realized with a jolt, surrounded by staring customers and shell-shocked staff. After a moment, Marcus approached cautiously. Claire, what should we do? She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just a coworker but a person. Someone Harold had treated like dirt, someone who deserved better. And suddenly Claire knew exactly what to do. Marcus, she said, her voice steady and clear, why don't you and anyone else working today close the cafe for the rest of the day? Paid obviously. Go home, rest. Tomorrow we start fresh, all of us. His eyes went wide. Seriously, seriously. Oh, and Marcus, that thing with the extra coffee beans earlier, that wasn't theft, that was generosity. Around here we're going to value that from now on. A slow grin spread across his face. Yes, ma'am. I mean yes, Claire. As he went to lock the front door and hang the closed sign, Claire walked behind the counter. She looked at the timer on the coffee pot, the one Harold had obsessed over, the one that had measured out the minutes until coffee became waste. Her first official act as manager was simple. She unplugged it and put it in the trash. Tomorrow there would be fresh coffee when people needed it, not when a timer said it was acceptable. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen, everything okay, dear? Very worried. Evan is asking about you. Claire smiled, a real genuine smile that felt like sun breaking through clouds. She typed back, everything is more than okay. Tell Evan mommy's coming home early, and we're going shopping for the best winter coat in the entire store. Maybe 2 coats, maybe 3. Whatever he wants. She hit send and stood there for a moment, looking out at the street through the window. The same street she'd walked down in despair less than 24 hours ago. Everything looked different now, brighter somehow, despite the gray sky. Claire Donovan, single mother, former barista, newly minted general manager, felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like the future was possible again. Claire didn't remember much of the walk home. She floated through the streets in a daze, the leather folders clutched against her chest like sacred texts. Every few minutes, her brain would try to process what had just happened and would fail, spinning out into disbelief again. This morning she'd been jobless and terrified. Now she had a career. And Evan had a future. When she opened the apartment door, Mrs. Chen was reading a magazine while Evan built an elaborate structure out of blocks on the living room floor. Mommy, he jumped up and ran to her. You're home early, and you're smiling. Mrs. Chen said you were sad this morning, but you look happy now. Claire scooped him up. He was getting so big, almost too big to lift, and held him tight. I am happy, baby. Really, really happy. Hey, you want to go on an adventure? His eyes lit up the way only a 6-year-old's could. What kind of adventure? The kind where we go to the store and you pick out the best winter coat we can find. Any color you want, any style, whatever you like, even the one with the dinosaur on it. The T-Rex one. Claire had seen that coat at Target. $89.99, completely out of reach for her budget. Evan had pressed his nose against the display every time they walked past. Especially that one, she said, blinking back fresh tears. Mrs. Chen was looking at her with open curiosity and concern. Claire dear, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost, or won the lottery. Maybe a little bit of both, Claire said with a shaky laugh. Can I tell you about it later? I need to do this with Evan right now. The older woman smiled, gathering her things. Of course, I'm happy for you whatever it is. You deserve some good news. Target was 17 blocks away. Normally Claire would have made Evan take the bus to save the $4 in subway fare. Today they took a taxi, a luxury so foreign that Evan spent the whole ride with his face pressed to the window, narrating everything they passed. Mommy, we're in a real taxi, like in the movies. Such a small thing, such a small joy that she'd been unable to give him for so long. In the children's section, Evan made a beeline for the coat display. The dinosaur coat was still there, hanging exactly where it had been last week. Blue and green with a T-Rex face on the hood, spikes running down the back, ridiculously impractical and absolutely perfect for a 6-year-old boy. Can I really get it? Evan whispered, like saying it too loud might break the spell. Try it on first, let's make sure it fits. It fit perfectly. Evan looked at himself in the mirror, turning back and forth to see the spikes, pulling the hood up so the T-Rex face framed his own. His grin was so wide it looked like his face might split. I look so cool. You look very cool. Claire agreed, and her voice only cracked a little. At the register she didn't have to check her account balance before pulling out her debit card. Didn't have to mentally calculate what this purchase would mean for the rest of the week's groceries. The relief of that, the simple mundane relief of buying her son a coat without anxiety, was almost as overwhelming as everything that had happened with Arthur Peterson. Can I wear it home? Evan asked as they left the store. Even though it's not that cold, please, I want everyone to see it. Okay, dinosaur boy, you can wear it. They walked home the long way, Evan occasionally stopping to show his coat to anyone who would look. A street vendor, a woman walking her dog, a bored teenager waiting at a bus stop. Each time someone complimented it, his chest puffed up with pride. This, Claire thought, this is what it means to be a good mother. Not just keeping him alive and fed and sheltered, but giving him these moments, these small joys, a coat he's proud of, a future without limits. That night, after Evan finally fell asleep, still wearing the coat, tucked around him like a blanket, Claire sat at the kitchen table and actually read through all the documents. The management contract was real. Start date, 1 week from today, after initial training began. Salary $65,000, which broke down to $5,416 per month. Claire did the math 3 times because the number seemed impossible. That was more than double what she'd been making, more than her mother had made as a nurse after 20 years in the profession. The benefits package included health insurance, actual good health insurance, not the catastrophic only plan she currently had that covered basically nothing. Dental, vision, even a 401k with employer matching. She'd be able to take Evan to the dentist, get his eyes checked, buy him new shoes before his current ones completely fell apart instead of after. The educational trust was even more overwhelming. The legal language was dense, but the summary was clear. Every expense related to Evan's education was covered, all the way through university. There were provisions for private school if they chose, tutoring, extracurricular activities, even study abroad programs. Her son could go to college, could go anywhere, study anything, wouldn't graduate with crushing debt like she had, wouldn't have to choose between his dreams and financial reality. Claire put her head down on the table and cried again, huge, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Relief and joy and grief for all the years she'd struggled and fear that somehow this would all turn out to be a mistake mixed together into an emotional storm she couldn't control. But eventually the storm passed, and she was left with something she hadn't felt in years: peace. The next morning, Claire's phone rang at 8 a.m. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize with a Manhattan area code. "Hello, Miss Donovan. This is Jessica Davies. We met yesterday. I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, not at all. I've been up since 6. Because she'd been too wired to sleep, her mind spinning with everything that had changed. "Excellent. I wanted to walk you through the next steps. We've arranged for you to begin training tomorrow at our corporate headquarters. You'll be working with our operations team to learn our management systems, but Mr. Peterson has been very clear that he wants you to maintain your own philosophy. Think of it as learning the tools, not being molded into someone you're not." Claire grabbed a pen. "Okay, where do I go?" Jessica rattled off an address in Midtown. "Dress comfortably. It'll be a lot of information, but everyone is very excited to work with you. Mr. Peterson has told them about what happened, and there's a genuine enthusiasm for implementing some cultural changes across the franchise." He told them, not your personal details, but yes, he told them about an employee who was terminated for showing compassion, and how that crystallized for him that our corporate culture needed examination. "You're becoming a bit of a symbol, Claire. I hope that's all right. A symbol, for kindness, for treating people like humans." "Yeah," Claire said softly. "Yeah, that's all right." After she hung up, she sat there for a moment processing. Then she called Mrs. Chen. "Margaret, it's Claire. Are you available to watch Evan for the next few weeks? I'm starting a new job, a good one, and I'll need consistent help. I can pay you more now. A lot more." There was a pause, then Mrs. Chen's warm voice, "Claire Donovan, you better tell me everything right now." So she did. The whole story: Harold, the coffee, the firing, the limousine, Arthur Peterson, everything. It poured out of her in a rush, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "My God," Mrs. Chen breathed when she finished. "That's Claire. That's incredible. You deserve this. You deserve all of this." "I gave him a cup of coffee, Margaret. That's all I did. No, honey. You saw someone who was suffering, and you helped them even when it cost you everything. That's not nothing. That's everything." The next 3 weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of training. Claire spent her days at Harper Industries' corporate headquarters, a gleaming tower in Midtown that made her feel like an imposter every time she walked through the lobby. But the people she worked with treated her like she belonged there. Jessica Davies personally oversaw much of her training, walking her through financial systems and inventory management. A woman named Patricia from HR taught her about hiring practices and employee relations. A man named David from operations showed her how to analyze sales data and predict trends. The key, David told her during one session, is to remember that data informs decisions, but it shouldn't make them. You're managing people, not spreadsheets. The numbers tell you what's happening, but you have to decide what to do about it. It was the opposite of Harold's philosophy, where the numbers were gospel and people were just variables in an equation. In the evenings Claire would come home exhausted but energized, her head spinning with new information. She'd have dinner with Evan, help him with his homework, and then spend a few hours reviewing training materials. Arthur Peterson checked in twice during those weeks, once via email asking how training was going, and if she needed anything, and once in person, taking her to lunch at a quiet restaurant near the office. "How are you holding up?" he asked over salads that cost more than Claire used to spend on groceries for a week. "It's a lot," she admitted, "but good. Everyone's been really welcoming. I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't belong here." "Imposter syndrome," Arthur said with a knowing smile. "I felt it for years when I first started building the company. But here's what I learned. Competence can be taught. Integrity can't. You have the harder thing to find, everything else is just skills." "Is that what Eleanor would say?" His expression softened. "That's exactly what Eleanor would say. She always believed that good people could learn to be good at things, but being good at things didn't make you a good person." He paused, looking down at his food. "I miss her every day, but this helping you, trying to fix what's broken in my company, it makes me feel closer to her somehow, like I'm finally doing what she always wanted me to do. Use your power for good instead of just for profit." Something like that. He looked back up at her. "Are you ready? Your official start date is Monday." Claire took a deep breath. "I think so. I'm terrified, but yes, I'm ready." "Good, because your staff is ready too. I've been getting reports that morale at that location has improved significantly just knowing that Harold's gone and you're coming. People are hopeful again." The weight of that people's hopes resting on her shoulders was intimidating, but it was also motivating in a way nothing else had ever been. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and crisp fall air. Claire stood outside Morning Brew Station at 5:30 a.m., a full 30 minutes before the store opened. She wore a new outfit she'd bought for the occasion, professional but comfortable, a charcoal gray blazer over a deep blue blouse, paired with her best black pants. In her bag was a key, an actual key to the store given to her by the district manager with a handshake and a welcome aboard. She was a manager now. A general manager, the person in charge. Claire took a deep breath and unlocked the door. The cafe was dark and quiet, exactly as she'd left it 3 weeks ago. But it felt different somehow, full of possibility, instead of oppression. She flipped on the lights, and the space came to life. Her first act was to walk to the corner where Arthur had always sat. She stood there for a moment, looking out at the same view he'd had, the courthouse clock tower framed between buildings. The street just beginning to stir with early morning workers. She understood now why Eleanor had loved this spot. There was something peaceful about it, something that invited you to slow down and watch instead of rushing. "Okay, Eleanor," Claire whispered to the empty cafe. "I'm going to try to make you proud." Over the next hour she made preparations. She'd already spent time over the weekend working with the district manager to implement some immediate changes. The first employee to arrive was Marcus, at 6:15. He stopped in the doorway, looking nervous. "Hey Claire, should I call you Miss Donovan now, or boss?" Claire laughed. "Marcus please, just Claire. Come here, I want to talk to you about something." They sat at a table, and Claire slid a piece of paper across to him. "What's this?" "Your raise, effective immediately. You're now a shift supervisor. $18 an hour instead of $14.50, and you'll be training new employees. If you want it." Marcus's eyes went wide. $18, but I'm just a college kid. I'm not even that good. You're better than you think. And you deserved more than Harold ever gave you credit for. So what do you say?" "I say, hell yes. Yes, definitely yes." Over the next 30 minutes, the rest of the morning shift arrived. Claire had prepared a short speech, but when she stood in front of them, Marcus, and 2 women named Teresa and Aisha, the formal words flew out of her head. "Okay, so, most of you know what happened. Harold's gone. I'm here now, and things are going to be different." She looked at their faces cautiously hopeful, waiting to see if she was just going to be another version of Harold. "Here's what I believe," Claire continued. "This is a coffee shop. We make drinks, we serve food, we help people start their day. It's simple work, but it's not easy work. You deal with rude customers, early hours, rush periods that are absolutely brutal. You deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. You deserve to be paid fairly. And you deserve to work somewhere that doesn't make you feel like a robot in a machine. Aisha nodded slowly. Teresa was listening intently. So here are some immediate changes. 1. No more timing coffee pots. We make fresh coffee when we need it, and if someone who can't afford a cup looks like they need one, we give it to them. I'm setting up a pay-it-forward program where customers can pre-purchase cups for people who need them. Marcus grinned. That's awesome. 2. Breaks are real breaks. You take your 15 minutes, you sit down, you breathe. No more of this working through your break stuff. 3. If a customer is abusive to you, really abusive, not just cranky, you can ask them to leave. You don't have to tolerate harassment for minimum wage. Teresa's hand went up tentatively. Really? We can actually do that? Yes, I'll back you up. Every time. This is a workplace, not a verbal punching bag service. She could see the tension leaving their shoulders, the way they stood a little straighter. And finally, Claire said, I need you to help me. I'm learning this manager thing, and I'm going to make mistakes. If you see something that's not working, tell me. If you have ideas for making this place better, I want to hear them. This isn't my cafe, it's ours. We're a team. There was a moment of silence, then Aisha spoke up. Can I just say, thank you. I've been working in food service for 6 years, and nobody has ever talked to us like this. Like we matter. You do matter, Claire said simply. So let's open the doors and show this neighborhood what a coffee shop run by decent people looks like. The first day was chaotic but good. Word had spread in the neighborhood about what had happened. The mysterious billionaire, the fired manager, the single mom who'd gotten promoted. It had the elements of an urban legend, and people came in out of curiosity as much as for coffee. Claire handled the attention with grace, neither confirming nor denying the wilder rumors. She focused on the work serving customers, learning the manager computer system, handling a supplier delivery, fixing a jammed espresso machine. Around mid-morning, an elderly man shuffled in. For a second, Claire's heart jumped, but it wasn't Arthur. This man was shorter, rounder, with a completely different face. But he had that same air of loneliness, that same look of being invisible. He approached the counter hesitantly. I was wondering if you have tap water. Claire smiled. We do, but how about a coffee instead? On the house. I couldn't, it's our pay-it-forward program. Someone already paid for it. You'd be doing us a favor by accepting. It was a small lie but a kind one. The man's face transformed with gratitude. That's very kind. Thank you. She made him a fresh cup and brought it to him personally at a table. As she set it down, their eyes met, and she saw it, that same profound thankfulness Arthur had shown her. The knowledge that someone had seen him as human. You're welcome, Claire said quietly. Stay as long as you'd like. At the end of her first shift, Claire was exhausted but satisfied. They'd had their highest sales day in 3 months, and more importantly, the energy in the cafe had been different. Lighter. People had lingered instead of rushing out. Staff had smiled, real smiles, not the forced customer service masks. She was locking up when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I heard through the grapevine that your first day went well. Congratulations. You're going to do wonderful things, Claire. Arthur Peterson, checking in without being intrusive, making sure she knew he was there if she needed support. Claire typed back, thank you, for everything. Trying to make Eleanor proud, the reply came seconds later, you already have. She stood on the sidewalk in the gathering dusk, looking back through the window at Morning Brew Station. Her cafe, her responsibility, her chance to prove that a business could be profitable and humane at the same time. Tomorrow she'd do it again, and the day after that, building something better, one cup of coffee at a time. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, mistakes, hard days, but for the first time in her adult life, Claire Donovan felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do, all because she'd given a freezing old man a cup of coffee when no one else would. Sometimes Claire thought as she headed home to her son, the smallest acts of kindness ripple out in ways you can never predict. Sometimes being human, truly human, in a world that rewards efficiency over empathy is the most radical thing you can do. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe notices and sends that kindness back to you in ways you never imagined possible. This story is a reminder that kindness is never wasted, That one moment of compassion can change everything. If this touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that decency still matters in this world. Subscribe for more stories that prove humanity and justice can win. Your support means we can keep sharing these powerful tales of hope. Thank you for being here, and remember, be the person who offers the cup of coffee. You never know whose life you might change, including your own. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.